Hello, welcome to the first pre-event of KU Hackfest 2022, a international digital first hybrid hackathon that is being organized by Kathmandu University Club from 5th August to 7th August 2022. Today, we are bringing to you a talk session on Azure Functions OpenAPI Extension with the intent of helping you learn the fundamentals of this topic. To conduct the exciting session and enrich the session, we couldn't think of anyone better than Mr. Jay Raj Mishra. Mr. Mishra is a technical lead at Xtrastaff, is also the founder of techWebinarNepal. So without further ado, let's hand over the stage to our guest speaker of today, Mr. Jay Raj Mishra, and let's get the session started.
Event to give some of my short view or a short whatever I have experienced on the .NET stack. I'll be presenting with you. So today my topics is on the Azure function, on the OpenAPI extension, mostly based on .NET 6, and what are the some of the innovation that is being done on the .NET Core. So before that, I want to introduce myself. Uh, so I am Jay Raj Mishra. I am basically a technical lead at Xtrastaff Singapore. It is an outsourcing company, and I'm basically the founder and organizer as well as a lead of techWebinarNepal Nepal. So we basically organize the technical webinar on the monthly basis, and it is a non-profit as say or organization or a community, right? And I was a past member of a Lions Club of Kathmandu spiritual. And just the term spiritual, I think most of you had been or you have been following the spirituality, right? So spirituality means spirit plus ritual. So what spirit you have or what you can do, right? So that's come up upon the spirit, and rituals means what is right and what is wrong. So if you know that, if you know to balance between mind and intellect, then that's more of often of a spirituality. And I suggest for the youth, because today most I think most of the participants are the youth. So I just want to suggest you that follow the spirituality to go on the right path. And currently I'm studying on the PBS Presidential Business School, MSCIT first year. So the today context is about .NET ecosystem, right? So I will be talking about .NET 6. Yeah, this is the latest version of a .NET framework. The more over .NET Core, about .NET Blazor, .NET MAUI, data warehouse, and the last part will be about Azure function. So you might heard about .NET, right? You might have heard about Python. You might have heard about Java, right? So which is best? The question come होइन कुन राम्रो हो होइन अब सबैजनाले पाइथन पढिरहेको छ because due to the data science might be you are studying Java to develop some of your application होइन but basically what I suggest is that if you want to build your career on the .NET, it is a great platform, right? So with the help of .NET, you can build desktop application, you can build web application, you can build cloud, right? So today the hype is about cloud computing. You can build the application of a mobile, you can build the gaming console, right? You can build the IoT, Internet of Things application, right? And you can also go to the current trend of AI or ML. So .NET has cover all the arena of technology. So if you know the .NET stack, right? So you can build in every and each sector, and you can get that project also, and you can build some of your great some of your great business idea, right? With the help of this stack. So just telling about the history of .NET. So .NET was basically uh, was on the 2001, right? So where I have also worked, not on 2001, but basically on ASP Classic on my first. So when I got the internship in some of the company, right? So they were building their application on the ASP Classic, which was very old, right? So just I got to know about the means how the application works, right? So, but today this technology has been obsoleted from the different business company. So the ASP Classic is no longer used. So now it is, so most of the business company use ASP.NET Core, ASP Web, or ASP.NET Core, and there is .NET Core also. Three systems are there. So if you see here, so .NET Framework 1, .NET Framework 1.1, .NET Framework 2.0, till .NET Framework 5.1, till .NET Framework 5.4.8, right? So this was the last framework where .NET used to support till Windows version only. So पहिला चाहिँ के थियो भने .NET application say it used to be only supported on the Windows, and as we know that Windows is much costlier on the deployment and in terms of license also. So it was pretty headache for a business to to use the .NET system. So rather than they used to go to the to the Java to develop their application. But after .NET Core, when Satya Nadella entered to Microsoft, right, thus he changed overall all the possibilities, means all his infrastructure over the company. So after the .NET Core, the application means we can host on the Linux, right? So as we also know that the hosting is much cheaper in the Linux server. So the today the current version, latest version is .NET 6. So there are many benefits, right? There are lots of advantages using the latest technology. But what I want to show you that, so from 2001 to 2022 in .NET ecosystem, lot of things has been changes, and with that changes, more realistic, more improvement version has came, and more quick and better solution of business idea can be implemented on this stack, right? So you don't need to again relearn, just you need to follow some standard guidelines, you need to know some best practices, you need to know some oops concept, right? So with help of that you can build a nice realistic native application for your idea, right? So today is also the hackathon, so you might have idea that in which technology I should build, right? So yeah, you can explore .NET. So with the help of .NET, any idea you have, you can create on that one. So I told you have idea for cloud, go with the .NET. You have idea with the mobile, go with the .NET, right? So I will really talk that which are the steps that needs to be followed. But generally, if you want to explore, then you can explore on the .NET technology, right? So there is some of the means fundamentals, right? Based on the cloud. So in the cloud, .NET is having Azure, Microsoft Azure is there on the .NET on the cloud. So for the web, it has ASP.NET. So ASP.NET is basically the web form, right? So there where it is to have a front file and a back file. So CS file was there basically, and now the latest is Blazor, right? So Blazor is basically the Spa framework which has been built by the Microsoft, just like Angular or React, right? So similar it is for the Blazor. So in terms of their desktops, there is .NET MAUI, there is a WPF, WinForm, right? So if you come with a mobile, right? So there is Xamarin, there is .NET MAUI, right? So basically MAUI is you can create a multiple application, right? So that means uh, you can create a iOS application, you can create a Android application with the help of .NET, right? So you with the help of Unity, you can create a gaming. So for the IoT, they use ARM32, they use ARM64. So that is basically the framework to build the IoT, right? And in the AI, so there is called ML.NET, so machine learning.NET. It is also a framework, right? And there is .NET for Apache Spark. So those guys who want to do on the ETL process, right? Who wants to do some of the idea on the data warehouse, they can explore this framework. So this basically these are the some of the framework and the concept which the .NET uses on different stack to build their application, right? So basically before .NET, what it used to do is that it used to have its own CLI, right? And it used to have its own programming language, just like C Sharp, right? F Sharp, you might heard, right? So now what they have did is that with one code base, that means share code base, you can build multiple tenant, right? So if I am building the web application, I don't need to learn the web programming language of a .NET, right? If I want to build a desktop application, I don't need to learn a desktop programming language of a .NET. So with a C# only, you can build all the arena of this platform, right? So it has become much powerful nowadays. So that's why business company use .NET for growth and faster development. So if I talk about the ecosystem, so there is a NuGet, right? So NuGet is basically the library npm NuGet package manager. Just like if you are working on a React or if you are working on a Angular, so you might heard or you might use on that part, right? So for the tool versioning, GitHub, right? So which Microsoft has acquired GitHub, so that is used for the versioning control. There is another called others vendors are also there that Microsoft is time off with to maintain their ecosystem. And we all know that Visual Studio, it is one of the most powerful IDE, right, of this today modern arena. So Visual Studio and Visual Studio Code, where most of the developer code on this IDE only, right? And there is Visual Studio for Mac, right? So if you don't want to use Windows, if you want to do coding on the Mac, then there is option of Visual Studio Mac also. So this is some of the unified development platform which .NET is it has did, right, to enhance the developer skill. Because as I am a developer, I don't want to learn many things, right? Because learning many things create will create lots of research, right? What the business company doesn't want to do, doesn't have a developer to do lots of research. They want a minimum research but a better output, right? So so with that concept, .NET has means created this criteria and has developed this unified version. So if I talk about the .NET 6, so which is the latest version of a .NET Core, right? So in the .NET Core also there is a three version: .NET Core 1.1, .NET Core 2.1, .NET Core 3.1, .NET Core 5, and .NET Core 6. So so core has been removed. So now after .NET 6, it will be .NET only. So there will be no .NET means in the upcoming uh, upcoming version. So let's talk about .NET 6. So .NET 6 is much faster than Node.js. So you might be heard that Node.js is one of the fastest programming language, right? But that's not the truth. .NET has overlap on that part. So with the help of .NET 6, so it is 0.66 minute for request, much faster. It is 10 times faster than Node.js. So if you see on here, it is 10 times faster. And if you compare to .NET 5, .NET 6 has the request per second is 311,778. So that means the request is much lesser on the .NET 6. So that's why most of the APIs are built on the .NET technology only. So now let's talk about how does the .NET Core works, right? So I told about from 2001 to 2010, 2022. Sorry, there are many versions, right? So how do it work? So basically, if we talk about till .NET framework, it used to host on the IIS. So we might all know that, right? So in the IIS, what it used to have is that it used to have request, right? It goes to the IIS server, right? Yeah. So in the code level, there is application begin request, there is application authenticated request, there is process request, there is in request, there is handle request. So for every layer, there used to be a function to handle that part, right? And based on that, the response will be sent to the server. So, but now with the .NET Core, the architecture has little changed. So now we don't use IIS. There is a concept of Docker. There is a concept of Docker image file, right? So we use nginx, right? Or there is Apache server also, or we can host on the IIS also too, right? So what the .NET Core is core will do is that it will so all will be done based on the Castor web server, and this is one of the powerful web server, web server. So this is how the .NET Core works. This is the application layer. Means whenever you hit some domain, right, it goes to this program.cs. Right now it goes to the program.cs. Before used to go to the startup.cs. Right. So this is the core some of the core concept which we should know this as being a .NET developer. Yeah, as I have told about the Visual Studio, it is one of the powerful IDE. So with that IDE also we can get the overview that how my project is designed, right? So application layer is there, there is a infrastructure layer is there is a web layer is there, right? There is a testing layer is also there, right? So all my application application core means if I want to do business logic, so that all the file, all the class library I will manage on that part at that segment, right? If I want to communicate with a data access logic, right? So that means if we are using the entity framework or if we are using the structure, right, with the help of Dapper, right? Or if we are creating a model, right? So all those will be on the infrastructure layer. So if we are creating some project means we need to follow some of the guidelines of the .NET Core, because if we if we follow the guidelines, it will be very helpful for us also and as well as the team whom we are working with, so they will also feel easier to work with us, right? And if the project is much simpler, then we can do much faster debugging, right? So there is a concept of helper class, right? Making the common things, right? So this type of things should be done. So right now I think you might, most of you are the student, right? So uh, in the student life you do yeah, means try and hard, right? His written trials goes on, right? But from there also you need to learn that what are the best practices, means in the industry, what are the best practices the application is developed. You need to learn that one, and if you learn that one, it will be very easy for you also, and the life which you are living, because developer job is very frustrated, right? So you might heard that every means there is one thing I just forgot, right? Means developer job is very hard, right? But if you follow some of the practices based guideline, then it will be very easy for you. So now the another innovation has came is the hot reload, right? So uh, in the .NET, right? So in the .NET, what it used to do is that it used to have every DLL file, right? So now on the .NET Core, it is also having a DLL file. For that DLL file, we need to again rebuild the solution, right? So for that, it takes time. It takes about 60 second or 30 second based on what is your size of a project, right? So with a hot reload, so you don't need to rebuild your whole system, yeah, whole application, right? So you are in your staging server, right? So you suppose if you want to do some debug, you just point debugger point, you click on the hot reload, it will point at that instance, right? So this is a nice feature where we don't need to rebuild the whole solution. And if we rebuild the whole solution, you might know that it takes some time in the Visual Studio. So this is one of the nice facility which ID which Visual Studio has gave us right now. So I talked about the Blazor, right? So I also told about the Blazor is similarly with Angular and React, right? But if you come with a .NET ecosystem, you if you try with a Blazor, it is much simpler with Angular as well as a React, right? So Blazor is a Spark framework, right? What it has is that it has a web assembly. So this is a new concept which you should also know, right? So basically, all the processing will be done on the client side rather than on a server side. So that is the core concept of a web assembly. So Blazor supports on Chrome, on Mozilla, on Edge, on Opera, on Safari. Means all type of browser it supports support, right? So there are two types of Blazor. There is client Blazor and there is a server Blazor, right? So if we choose the server Blazor, then the request comes, then the request go to the server, it processes the things and it sends back to the client, right? But with a Blazor client, right? If anything needs to be done, right? So it just do on the DOM. So that is document object model, right? So it will not go to the server to again reprocess that one. So it is a nice facility. You can see this one, right? And I think you have study in your computer, might be on the computer subject, that there is a client and there is a server. So this is a basic in the programming field, right? So if you want to be a software developer, you should know this. There is a client, there is server, and the client sends the request, the server process that, and it sends the response, right? So response is 200, there is 401. So you should know the what are the response type also, right? So 200 is success. Every time 200 comes, that is denoted as a success, right? And a request means your input parameter. What is your input variable, right? So if you have created a model, right? So model is basically the properties, right? Just like I have a first name, last name, middle name. So that can be, yeah, that can be set as a model and that will be the input, right? So I'm sending the input as a request, processing is done and it will get back to the response by the server. So this basic concept you should know while means while becoming the things, right? So so you can explore the Blazor, right? So it is a one of the nice technology. So if you want to work on the Spark framework, and one more thing I want to say is that what is the difference between Angular and React? So Angular, it is hard to learn, but it is easy to implement, right? So that's why most of the company use Angular for their rapid application. React is easy to learn but hard to implement. That's why most of the startup uses React, right? So if you see the trend, right? Most of the business company use Angular, mostly e-commerce related. They use Angular because they want the fast execution, so they go with a Angular. But if you want to do some of the research, you want to do some of the experience, right? Experience, not experience. So you can go with that React. Okay? So yeah, you can try with the Blazor also similarly. So to develop the application, and it supports the mobile also. It can support basically web as well as the mobile. So now let's come with a Maui, right? So Maui is basically the multiple application. So if you see here, so with the help of Maui, that means the .NET, with the help of C Sharp, you can build iOS application, you can build Android application, you can build Mac OS application as well as the default window application, right? So it supports the cross-platform, right? Before the .NET were used not to be supported by the cross-platform, it used to only support the Windows, but now it supports all the tenant, right? So single project system, single code base. Yeah. So C Sharp is the main. So with the help of C Sharp, you can create multiple this tenant, Windows, iOS, Mac, right? And or other whatever is there is operating system, right? And basically this now is available on the .NET 6 also. So now let's come on the cloud, right? Because we are talking about the Azure function. We should know about how the cloud works. What are the model on the cloud? So basically there used to be on-premises. On-premises means I'm having a company and I have set up the server. So that means on-premises. So what was the benefit of on-premises was I can handle application, I can handle data, I can handle the runtime, middleware was there, I can handle the OS, virtualization was facility there, server was facility there, storage was there, networking was there. So yeah. So what was the limitation that why on-premises is not best? Why today most of the business are going with the cloud? Because due to the cost, right? So if I have an on-premises server, I have to pay for all these things, right? Networking, storage, server, which I don't need, right? Based on my application need, right? So that's why people wants to move to the cloud, right? So three segment has been done. infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and software as a service, right? So infrastructure as a service, if I want to build the infrastructure, just like I have an application I want to deploy, so that comes on under infrastructure as a service. I have a data warehouse I want to manage. So I means I can have on the IaaS, right? Runtime, middleware, OS, operating system with Linux or Windows, right? Virtualization, do I need virtualization or not? Server, storage, what type of, how much storage do I need? So this all facility can be provided by the cloud model, right? So I don't need to pay extra money for my business application. So that is one of the benefit of having a cloud. So that's why most of the businesses use cloud. And I think with this hackathon also, most of you guys has been using cloud, might be Huawei or something, the new one, uh, Alibaba. So I forgot the name. So yeah, uh, so with the help of cloud, we can means do a better computation as well as better application deployment as well as running into the cloud model, right? So so why I want to add this context is that, so you are studying, right? So you have made your application, but if you are not aware about the data warehouse, there is no way of making the application, right? So basically, if you are making the application of a data, it can be anything, right? It can be a newspaper or a e-commerce, right? So you all need to make a data warehouse, right? So basically, data warehouse is a collection of a used data, right? Where with the help of use data you can do some of the processes, right? So where you can trigger out some of your processes. So today everyone should know about the data warehouse. How does the data warehouse work, right? So because it is one of the cutting edge technology also, and most of the company are running on this model, just like Deerhold. Recently the company has established their all operation areas on the data warehouse, right? All the company has been set up, means they do only the project on the data warehouse. It has a lots of opportunity. So if we know the core concept, so we can do lots of business on this domain. So basically, if we talk about the data warehouse, right? So the first point we should know is that where the data comes. The data comes might be from the CSV file, that is the flat file, or it might be from some of the log, or it might be some of the event, right? Might be some of the IoT device, right? Or might be some of other databases which we can pull to our own database, right? So first we should know the collection of where the data is, right? So after knowing the data, we can use some of the Azure services, right? So as I told, pay as you go, right? So we don't need to pay all the services of a cloud. Just what is needed, that only we need to pay, right? So there is a event bus, right? So there is a event bus service where we can do a job. There is a Kafka for maintaining the huge scale of data, right? So that is for the processing of a huge scale of data, right? So whenever the data comes, it injects, right? So that is means ETL, extract, transform, load. So this whole process is on the ETL is only. So if we are familiar with the ETL, then we can much better know about the data warehouse. So extract, where is your file? It comes from flat file, or maybe another other source, might be API. We extract the data, we transform it, right? Transform is basically filtering the data, sorting the data, removing the duplicate, removing the unstructured into the structured one, right? So for formation of unstructured to semi-structured, semi-structured to structured data. So that also come under this process, right? And then after extract, transform, load, then after to load into the to the custom database. So some of the service which we can use, just like Azure Data Factory, right? So that is basically the extraction, right? So Azure Data Explorer, it is used for the transformation, right? And for other, we can use Cosmos DB for the load part. We can save to that data, and based on this thing, so we can use Python also, right? We can use Node.js for the manipulation of a data. Suppose you want to add some of your logic or logic, right? So at the transformation process, you can just customize on that thing. So there is Azure and there is uh, AWS, right? So uh, which is better? The question comes, which cloud provider is better? So all is better. It depends upon your company, that about the company, about the cost, about your operation, that how much, at what budget do you want to purchase the cloud infrastructure, right? All is giving the base solution. So whatever I have told on that Azure, that same service is on the AWS also. Thus, the difference is that naming convention, right? So for the Azure Data Lake, there is here called uh, AWS Glue, right? So the naming convention is only different, but overall cloud provider service is similar only, right? So it depends upon your company, right? It depends upon your research, right? So if you want to go with the latest one, just like Huawei, sorry, Jack Ma is the Huawei, not one. It is Alibaba, sorry, Alibaba. If you want to go with the latest one, Alibaba, then you can try Alibaba, like you can try Huawei, right? So it depends upon your ability zone also. How do you want to redirect, right? How much ability zone they have provided. They have Singapore, or they have India, China. Is how many have their 14 ability zones? Some say they have 10 ability zones. Some say they have 25 ability zone, right? So based on that, you can also purchase on that thing. So let's come to the AWS. So in the AWS, we have streaming data. There is social media data. So this is basically where you get the data, right? So I told about the flat file or API, right? So these are also some of your source where you can pull the data, right? So in terms of AWS, so the S3 bucket. So in AWS there is S3 bucket. In Azure there is blob storage, right? So this is the storage medium. So we store the data. We use AWS Glue, or we use data lake. So that is basically the filtration process, the transformation process, right? And after that, we can use some Redis, right? We can use some Athena, right? So Athena is basically to query the SQL into the faster way, right? And we can use some of the ML, right? So I think this hackathon is mostly done on the ML part. So we can use Amazon SageMaker platform to use some of the ML facility, right? Then after on the reporting side, we can use uh, some of the tools on the reporting side also, just like QuickSight is there, right? And we can store on the DynamoDB, right, in the AWS. So MongoDB also supports on here. SQL Server also supports here, right? So yeah, that's the thing. So I told about Mongo DynamoDB. So it is a distributed database. If I talk about the Azure, it has Cosmos DB, right? So distributed means it is having not dependent with each other. If we are having a large data set, so for a large data set, the processing time also take place, right? So those type of data can be handled by the distributed database. So now comes under what is Azure function, right? So basically now cloud has become the serverless. We don't have a server, right? It is fully running on the serverless. So serverless is basically nothing, right? There is a server you need to pay, but that is independent. So there is no any dependent between each and every arena, right? So it can work its own self, and based on that you need to pay, right? So basically, Azure Function is a serverless solution that allows you to write less code, right? So you don't need to write many code, maintain less infrastructure, right? And save on the cost. So one of the headache is that on premises is that you need to make lots of infrastructure. You need to make every pipeline, right? But with the help of cloud, right? You write your code less, but that also depend upon your business logic, what type of business logic you have, right? But the infrastructure will be less, right? So all will be dependent, right? So you don't need to put a burden on it's one is having the dependent with other, so that the facility gives by the serverless architecture, right? So if you see on this diagram, all right, so there is a two application, app service 1 and app service 2, right? So I have a two application, let's assume. So both of the application is managed by API management. So I have an Angular application. I will make a application on a Java, let's say. Okay. So there is a request, right? So we call API. There is a verb, right? So there is a get verb. There is a post. There is a put. There is a delete. So these all are the verbs of a API, right? So something get came, right? Let's say get customer list, right? So before, what it used to do is that there was a monolithic architecture. Now most of the system are in the microservices, right? Not on the monolithic. So every request come, the same server used to process and used to send response back to the client. But now with the help of microservice, with the help of distributed architecture, right? So I can make a individual application, right? So suppose I want to get a customer application, it comes to my API, and I will decide that which server I need to send. Suppose I'm making this on the Python or on the Node.js, right? So I'll write some code on that, and I'll say get return back some of the customer list. After that, it will return back to the app service 1, right? So now there is no dependency, right? So it so the response back will also, so here the response back will cross time. So in this scenario there will be no response back because this is independent, right? But if we are creating a monolithical application, there will be a response back and it might take a time. But now it depends upon what type of this cluster is made. Might be it is made on 1 GB or 2 GB, right? Means based on the configuration. So it will take most time and it will do the processing. So the best case use is that when you upload a file, ETL, let's say when you upload a CSV file, the data file, it used to validate the data. It's from the API. I have did the validation, I have did the filtration, right? And if the file is right, now I'll send to the independent service, to the Lambda function. So basically, Azure function is also known as the Lambda function. In the AWS, it is known as a Lambda function, and in the Azure, it is known as a uh, Azure function, right? So so with the help of this, so now if I am having a 10,000 of data, I can process within a fraction of millisecond. So I don't need to depend upon my own API. So that is the advantage of a serverless, of a Azure function, right? So yeah, and based on that, so you have a central database, might be SQL Server or might be Azure Cosmos DB. You can save to that one. So let's say you have a two file, you have a two client, right? So what is one is sending CSV file, and other is also sending the CSV file. You do validation on the API, and suppose it is having 1 lakh of record, right? So if there is 1 lakh of record, that means both is having 2 lakh of record, right? So for API, it is very hard to process that one. It will take time, but it is very hard. But if we make a serverless, then within a friction of millisecond or a second, those data can be processed and can be stored uh, to the database. So Cosmos DB is just the example. We can use SQL Server or a MongoDB. So I think you have been clear about what is Azure function and what is serverless. So now come with the last part is about Open API, right? So Open API is nothing, right? Basically, this is I don't think this is a programming language, but it is a practices that describe the HTTPS, right? It is a set of a format, right? Means or a structure that defines the RESTful API. So in the API also we have a SOAP API and we have a REST API, right? So SOAP API used to be very famous, I think in till 2014-15. So now most of the business are using REST API for their operation because SOAP API is very heavy on their payload, but REST is quite lighter in the payload. That's why nowadays most of the developers use API, a RESTful API for their operation, right? So open API is basically a definition, right? Basically a syntax that defines that how should we write a API. So that is the what does the that open API does like WCC, right? So like that. So it defines the HTML, right? So like similarly with open API, it defines the standard. API definition. So we have a service contract and the data contract, right? So service contract is basically we create the controller, right? So based on that controller, we get the logic, and we create a logic on there, and then after we go to the data layer, then after we go to the database, means to check whether the data is there or not, or then again it comes to the service contact, right? So basically service contact is having the controller part on that side. So no, it says that open API, no API implementation is needed, but yeah, that's true because it it creates your documentation auto generated, so you don't need to write again that what does this controller do, right? So with the help of Swagger, right? So you can know that you can know the code, yeah. So what does that controller do? So yeah, so if you know that what that controller do, so there will be a less dependency, right? So you don't need to again ask to other developer that what the code is being written, because all the things is written on the controller only, right, with the help of Swagger, right? So if so with that, dependency will be less and there will be more agility in the agility of a development, right? So if there will be a more agility, scalability can be done, flexibility can be done on the API side, right? Suppose I'm making a API, right, and I want to sell to the third party, right? So there is a third party client, and he needs a documentation, but that documentation is very poor. He doesn't understand that. Okay, but with help of Swagger, right, all the documentation is on that Swagger only. Thus, he needs to read that what are the things, what are the parameter. There is a description also. Fully, the documentation can be done on the Swagger, right? So there will be no hassle of making the extra like documentation, right? So if we make an extra documentation, then again resources, again time, means it will consume. So for every organization, time is very important, right? So based on that also, Swagger is been popular nowadays. So this open API can be used on Azure Function, on business app, right? So these are some of the service of the Azure. So there is a Swag buckle, right? So this is basically the project of Swagger, right? So you can explore about the Swaggle bucket. So and basically for the ASP.NET web app, it support as well as is supposed to all the language nowadays. Mm. So what's available for .NET function? So do you think that this open API will support on the Azure function? Because I have said that Azure function is an independent service, right? It is a serverless. So does it support? So let's try out this one, and you can try this one. So if you are having a mobile app, right, you can just see this one. So you will get a source code of this one. You can find the repository of how it works. So now let's come. I think it's the time of a demo. So before that, this Azure function supports on .NET 6 also, right? And there are two supporters in proc and out proc, right? So in proc is basically having the open API, and out proc is not having the open API. So if you are making a Lambda function or a Azure function, right? So if you are having open API, so that means in proc, right? That means it will automatically in the controller only you will get the feature of open API. But output you need to again install, means from the NuGet package or and from the NuGet package, right? uh, then after you need to reinstall on that part. So let's have some of the demo. So if there is any question, then you can just type. So I'll be happy to give the answer, right? So before this demo, I want to show about the Blazor because you might think that what is the Blazor? Why I am talking about the Blazor, right? So there are two types of Blazor. I think my screen is visible. This, uh, I think. Okay, now comes to the Visual Studio. So I have told about the Blazor, right? So if you see on the Blazor, there are two types of Blazor: Blazor WebAssembly and Blazor Server, right? So server is basically everything will be processed on the server side. But if you want to process the certain thing on the client side, you can use the WebAssembly. So let's say suppose I have give some name. Let's say test. So if you see on this one, so 3.1, 5.0, and 6.0, right? So 5.0 is out of support, right? So if you are exploring the .NET, don't go with a .NET 5 or .NET 3.1. Just jump directly to the latest version 6.0, right? So ASP.NET Core hosted means it will get the file of .NET Core also. And if you want to make a PWA app, just like if you want to support the mobile also, you can click on this option. So this project will be run on the web as well as on the mobile, right? So if you see here, so there are two files. There is a client file and there is a server file. I have chosen server side, right? So if I want to do any operation, it will go to this server side. Means all my database logic will be on this server side. So let's test this one. Uh, for the project. So you are seeing this one. So it is going to my server, right? And then after it is loading, so it is taking some time, right? But if I am doing some but if I have created on the client side with help of WA WebAssembly, then it used to be fast. So there are some of the drawback of choosing the server side, but it will be better if we choose the client side, basically Blazor for WebAssembly. So that will be much better. And if you see the current uh, structure of the project, before there used to be a startup.cs, but now there is no, right? So by default, there is a program.cs, right? So if someone's question you that what is the hitting point, right, of a .NET Core, then program.cs, right? So first of all, it goes to the program.cs, then after it goes to the other controller of the page, right? So in here, if you see here, there is a builder. So it builds the project and it will go to the other segment of the project, right? So on the .NET 5 and .NET 6, there is no startup.cs, but in .NET 3.1, in the .NET Core 2.1, there is a startup.cs. So startup.cs was the entry point of the application, but now program.cs is the entry point of application in the .NET Core. Okay, so now let's come to the this Azure function. So this is my last one, Azure function, right? So this is a serverless Azure 456. So if you come here also you will get the option to choose .NET Core 2. .NET 3.1, .NET 5, .NET 6, right? So you choose the latest one. So I told about the in procedure and out procedure, right? So if you tick this one, HTTP trigger with OpenAPI, that means it is in. If you don't tick this one, if you choose on the empty, that will be the out, right? So if we go with this one, what it does is that it will create the boilerplate of a Swagger, right? So you don't need to again put the Swagger code, the plugin, right, or the dependency of the Swagger code. And if you run this project, so there will be a four function. So function one, so this is your main API, right? So where you need to give to the third party. This is if you want to add some auth zero, right? You can go with that one. There is a open API documentation, right? There is a Swagger documentation. So this one is there for the testing for the client, because the client will not understand, right? It will only understand the documentation of this part. The client doesn't know that what in your API it has been written, right? So because they want this type of thing, right? So with this, you can test your API, right? You can do lots of things, right, with the Swagger, and this has been the popular, yeah, in terms of RESTful API. So now let's come if you want to do some of the changes. So there is a function name. This is what is your function, right? There is a API operation. So this run is basically the method name, right? So suppose I want to add the another function, say function two, right? So I need to say run two, or you can do anything, means you can name anything, right? I have made some of the logic here. I have did some of my coding here, right? And I have executed it. So this will give me a two controller, right? So every time you open, so you need to copy this URL, and then after you need to open the debugger. So it has created me the function one and the function two. So yeah, it is interesting, right? Because when you are working on the serverless Lambda function or Azure function, right? So you need to use the Postman, and Postman is, I think it is little headache because there is no documentation. So what I mean documentation is that this documentation, right? So you can write some description. What does the function do, right? You can say this name. So name is the parameter property, right? So whether it is required or not, you can know from here, right? So what is the data type? You can know from here, right? Rather than again going to the code, seeing the model, seeing the what is the property name. So you can know from here only, from the UI only, you can know that what it is type, the description, the data property, right? And how the response will be. So will it be text slash plain, or it will be text slash, or it will be application slash JSON, right? So all the things will be listed in here, right? So just explore on this part, right? So with today's presentation, you might have been some of the confusion, but if you practice this one, then yeah, I think you can be familiar. And I think on this hackathon, you might need to create the API, right? So just try with this one with the Azure function, right? Or you can go with a Lambda function also. So in the Lambda function, this open API hasn't been indicated in the AWS, but I'm sure that they will do by this 6 month or 1 year, by the next year. So so the main core objective of this is that so you don't need to again reintegrate into your Lambda or into the Azure function. By default, it gives you the boilerplate, right? So if it gives you the boilerplate, it will be easier for you to debug or to execute the this function, this type of function. So let me again share my PPT. Okay, so we have did for the OpenAPI Azure function, and I think that most of you guys has been clear about what it is, right? You might be some of you might be new on this one. I think most of you are new on this one, right? So you just need to explore, right? If you explore, then only you will get the ideas on this part. Then if you want to know some of the advanced configuration, then yeah, you can do some bar scan QR code. You can get some of the documentation on this part, right? So how do we migrate, right? So yeah, let me again share my screen to .NET 6. So it is very simple. So if we come with a property, right? If you go with a property, suppose let's say this application is on .NET 3.1. Let's say this application is on .NET 3.1. So with the help of Visual Studio, you can change. So suppose I want to do on the .NET 6, right? If I want to do on the .NET 6, and if I save, right, what it will do is that it will automatically whatever is here the plugin, right? Because if we update the version, the plugin needs also to be updated, right? The ID will manage all that part, right? So this Visual Studio will automatically update the version. Suppose let's say in the .NET 3.1 the version was this 2.1, right? But if you update to .NET 6, it will update to the latest version. Just give a try, right? So I think this is one of the coolest feature of a Visual Studio that what I have tried out. Okay, so now let's come to the PPT. Yeah, so at last try it yourself as I already told, right? So with this, uh, I think it's been more than 45 minutes. So you need to try out, right, with the latest stack of a .NET. So what are the things, right? So it is just overall, I think with that you have got some of the idea. So if you want to implement on your project, you can just explore, you can just add on that on your project. Yeah, it will be grateful. So one of the best advantage of .NET is that you will get a community support. There is a huge community support of a .NET, right? So that, yeah, that's all my topic. So if you have any questions related with this one or a .NET ecosystem or with a career point of view, yeah, I'm ready to answer your question. Thank you. Yeah, over to you, Master of Ceremony, Ayush.
Hello everyone, hope that was a very entertaining session for you, and I hope you get some of the knowledge that he shared with us. And so I would like to thank Mr. Jay Raj Mishra for joining us today and conducting such an informative session. I'm sure that under your guidance, everyone here with us today can confidentially say that they learned something of, on the topic. And dear viewers, it's time to wrap up the first talk show conducted by this year's hackathon organizing team. Do keep an eye out on other events as well. Tomorrow we are having two events. The first one is UI UX design on Figma. That's by our KUOSC community. And the another is SoloNet session. The first one's happening around 5 to 6, and the second one's happening around 7 to 8. We will be posting it on the our social media soon, and you shall also be getting a script for it. So, anyways, so please do. It seems someone is.
Yeah, so whenever I do for private session, I just close all the screen, Facebook, LinkedIn, right? So it will be better to do like
Okay,
that.
so anyways, thank you everyone. That's it for this session. And please do join us tomorrow on 5 p.m. for UI UX design on Figma. And thank you, Mr. Jay Raj Mishra, for your for your kind
Thank
talk
you.
on.
Thank you.
Yes,
Also, it was great to share some of my experience on the .NET, right? So the session was on the Azure function, but I have shared other things also, which was not out of our topics because most of you are the new, right? So you should have a right to know that what is going on the .NET. So based on that, I have created the content, and I think with this, it will be very helpful for your idea, idea also to explore this one, to do some of your projects, right? Do something, right? So you can achieve a lot of things, right? And the first is that you need to have a right mentor, right? So just follow some of the right mentor, and you can do everything. And thank you, Ayush, and thank you, Fest 2022. All the best for the event. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Thank you for joining us today.